section, or are we going to wait till later on for that?
Yeah, you mentioned this paper, so it makes sense, maybe.
Just to confirm, that is in this paper, and Yvette just updated on the consultation process. So we did submit, 5 of the councils did submit in response to the government's consultation on that, and there is a little bit of information in the paper about what the government proposed. Yeah.
Sorry, Jeff.
You carry on.
I just wondered which councils didn't put in a submission. Might just not have had the resources, but...
So we've had Porirua, South Wairarapa and Carterton District Council that didn't submit. Everyone else did.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Jeff.
That's all right. So just so I'm clear in my mind, the update was what was already just given verbally. There wasn't anything else there. It was a tantalising notion when I heard it, and I thought that there might be something more to the story, but maybe it's just all steam bohangi.
There's definitely some steam there. Councillor, Wellington City might lose $600,000 out of the levy until it increases. Do you want to just go a bit into the implications of the levy? It's important. I know you put out the calculation, but just what it means.
I can briefly talk to it generally, but in terms of the Wellington City position, it's probably over to Stephanie. So effectively what the government's proposing is to move to a model where 20% of the funding is allocated on basically a fixed approach, and 80% of the funding is allocated as it has in the past. So effectively, you've got smaller councils that currently get very little funding. I think one example was, I'm just trying to think of the.
Chatham Islands got nothing. They got about 11,000 or something.
Yes, and that would go up to over 100,000. Of course, there's not very much you can do with $10,000. So that would definitely, I guess, level the playing field a little bit more. However, it does obviously impact the bigger councils that get the a significant chunk of the funding. So if you want to maybe briefly talk to this, Stephanie, around what that means for larger councils.
Sure. As alluded to, Wellington City Council would stand to potentially lose some future money that could have come through the waste levy. So through the submission that was finalised, it was that Wellington City Council wouldn't support that levy change. However, we did note within that if it was to go ahead, then a stepped approach would have to be taken because obviously future forecasting relies on that levy money.
So I made changes to that submission when it was given. So basically, I get the equity argument. I think it's fair. There are some small councils, even though they don't have the population, that might have the waste issues, right? So it hasn't, while there's a policy justification for going for the bigger cities, there is a problem there. But the problem is also that means Auckland and Christchurch and the Hutt and Dunedin will have big cuts. So, 600,000 was from Wellington, it was 3.4 million, I think. Like, that's a big cut. Now, the document says that will be offset by by an increase in the levy, but we know that at $60 a tonne, it's still too low to really shift behaviour. And I'm sceptical politically whether this government will want to see a large increase in the levy, right? Because they're not just philosophically tax and cost of living and all that sort of stuff. So what we ended up saying is, look, get the equity argument, but that levy needs to go up so that we at Wellington City are not losing such a big chunk of money. It will have a significant impact on our program, obviously. The other issue too, of course, is that the expansion of the levy troubles us because the whole point of ring fencing it was to do waste minimisation, even though some of the other things that the government's looking at are valid in of themselves. It's just it does reduce our money. Jeff, did you have a point or a question?
I should have.
We can keep it
reasonable. Yes, it was a question. Sorry, I guess I should just admit mea culpa that I wasn't clear with my previous question around an update. My point was having heard all of that, and yes, it is indeed covered to some level in the document. Perhaps I could just, how do I do this? Perhaps I could draw people's attention to point 36, which was just that the consultation had closed, and that I had thought that the update was in regards to what the government's time frame for any response to the feedback. So do we have anything in terms of that tantalising notion?
Not at this point. We don't have any timeframes as to when or if a new bill will be introduced.
Okay. One last question.
Yep.
It's just, again, following on from the previous line of questioning, the requirement from Wellington City Council to return to the council to get a decision regarding the regional versus local approach of a organic waste diversion and processing. It's been mentioned as a delay. Could someone give some clarity as to what that delay would mean actually in terms of timing? Is it a 3-month delay? Is it longer than that?
Sure. So the decision will be made in August, so early August. So the delay is approximately 2 months.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. No more questions.
Can I just clarify, did Porirua not submit just for resource reasons?
Unfortunately, we don't have anybody from Porirua City Council present today. They're at the Waste Minimisation Conference in Christchurch. So as far as the rationale behind that part of it, I can't give you any clarity at this stage, but I'm sure that we can get an answer back to the committee members.
Yeah, so look, just in future, if Porirua needs some help, maybe we can put our heads together, because it would have been good to have your voice on that document. Have you seen it? The discussion on the WMA, Jeff? Oh, has he dropped off? Oh, okay. Now, just in terms of the FOGO, there are some political considerations at play, just given there is going to be a change in leadership at Hutt and Wellington, obviously with decision of 2 mayors to not seek re-election. There is a will in some parts to make some fast progress, because there is we have now been talking about this for a long time. In fact, I got money put aside for a business case to look at this in 2018. So it just, yeah, it's been going on for a long time. But, you know, like, obviously still do want to aim to work collegially. It was, and of course it was difficult, Porirua, for their own reasons, pulling out too. So it's just, yeah, it has been possibly more challenging than we had envisaged at the end. And the other issue, Jeff, I don't know if you're online. Yeah,
I've just got back on, so apologies.
Yeah. Is that Wellington City will get some savings. Most people not the people who have already reduced their waste, unfortunately, we've still got to deal with that. But the people who have got like large bins or whatever, we're going to get some savings for those people. For the good people of the Hutt, that will not necessarily happen. So because they are further ahead in their waste reduction journey than us. So there's just a bit of a trickiness there. Jeff, sorry, when you dropped off, I was just saying that if we'd known that Porirua didn't have the resources to put a bit of feedback on the WMA, I would have been more than happy to help. So maybe just for the future.
Yes, can do. Thank you for that piece of advice.
We could have just given you our document. You could have just done a few tweaks.
Yeah.
Just to save time. Cool. Deputy Mayor Swales.
Thank you. Just a quick. Was there any thought of collaboration that a joint collective submission was going to be put in? Was that ever discussed by the officers?
Yes, that was discussed, but we discounted that very quickly because it is a very onerous process to get it through the various councils at the same time. So it's far more efficient just to do individual submissions, and also realising that some of the views might differ. So, for example, at Hutt, we did support the 80-20 proposal, and probably I would say the smaller councils would have done that. Obviously, there is a difference in position there.
And I think generally, like, we're only given a month too, so that just makes it difficult. So our submission actually didn't go through committee because there wasn't enough time to get through it. Just had to sign off from
You
chairs.
thought the 22nd of April was a reasonable time.
Yeah, I think partly because we were just had a heavy workload on our council anyway. I don't know what others. Any other questions, colleagues? Oh yes, Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, just coming back to FOGO processing and the idea that Wellington might go it alone. And just looking at the update on page 25 of our agenda about organic waste management and minimisation, and there's a list there of all the councils. Kapiti Coast update, progressing curbside food scrap collections is contingent on a facility being available. Porirua update, money in the long-term plan for collection starting in 2029, dependent on the startup of a processing facility within reach of the city. I just wonder if officers have had any indication of if our councils collectively don't provide this processing facility, is there any private providers who have shown or indicated that they might be coming to the region?
Potentially, yes. Certainly when we've talked to the likes of EcoGas in the past, they have expressed an interest of potentially setting something up. But ultimately, whether or not, just because even if you do have a facility, you still as a council need to make a decision of whether you want to establish a collection or not. So even if there was a processing solution in place, it doesn't fix the problem of there not being any organics collection. So that's only half of the equation.
Yeah, I agree, but we've got councils indicating essentially that they can't progress without a processing facility, so that's kind of key to their decisions, I think.
Yep, absolutely acknowledge that. So at the moment, we don't know whether or not that they would set it up without the investment or the approach that we're currently following, which is to procure a solution. Obviously, we would only be procuring a part of the solution because that plant, would ideally then service other areas, including commercial quantities of food and green waste. So until, I guess, we've gone through the process, we won't know what the alternative looks like. So that does generate some uncertainty in terms of the delay at the moment might not be very long, but obviously the decision in August could be quite critical in terms of determining the path for everyone else.
Can I just ask the smaller councils, would you be hoping that you could become a client of Wellington City and Hutt to deal with your processing needs? It's a good time to have that discussion while everyone's in the room.
Broader question at this stage, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, a process has been gone through to get to this point. So I can't comment on behalf of our council. I'm sure other councils can't as well with regards to what may or may not be the result that we would do in regards to things. Fully support any options that's going to help with organic waste as such. But if that was going to be the conversation, then we should have done this in a joint way. But that's not. So if we're going to go through a different process, then we will go through a different process around this. But I certainly can't make any promises or declarations or anything like that. So at this stage, we'd have to go through a process for that.
Thank you, Chair. So we piloted a program in partnership with Will Hanson around organics. He has since sold it to another local entity called Ron Vink, who was successful in getting some funding from MFE. So we will go ahead with that, but his capacity would only be able to take that organics from Upper Hutt. Whether he has the ability to grow that, I'm not sure, but I believe officers are a little bit aware of what Will had in Upper Hutt.
All of Upper Hutt's organics?
That's what we're led to believe, yes.
Oh, well, that's good. And do you know what the cost is, by any chance? Or is it,
No, but we could come back to you with that.
You
But he
could-
does do
you don't have
an
to do-
electric bike collection around the hut. Yep.
you don't have to do that in public if you want. I appreciate it might be sensitive, but that sounds very positive.
Thank you.
Yeah. The problem, Councillor Halliday, is that Wellington City ratepayers have to pay for, as well as HUT, as well as hopefully getting some money from MFE.
Yeah, all due consideration, Madam Chair. These are all considerations that Wellington City Council made when they put their hand up. I fully appreciate what you're saying, okay, but we all have been through a process around this, so excuses are fine. Okay, you're going to be reevaluating budgeting. I fully get that with regards to legislation that's been pushed on us again by central government that's changing the rules, and that's not fair on you guys. I give that to you 100% as such. So we may have to change track because of that issue. You know, maybe there might be some central government funding to help bridge that conversation. I don't know. But wheeling and dealing at this point, I think, you know, or trying to get indications at the moment, it's not necessarily a good way forward. You know, in August, sounds like the decision's going to be made, and then we'll have to reevaluate the pathway forward from that point. I mean, I know from our end, we're supporting smaller organisations, community groups. I think we've got about 3 or 4 on the Kapiti Ghost at the moment that are doing a certain amount of collecting in this space. We're a group of little townships, you know, so that might be a better solution for us. I don't know. But that's the pathway we've gone down at the moment as such. And so, look, fully acknowledging the situation you're in, and not necessarily of what the council's making because of the what government's done with its funding as such. But I think we need to wait to see what decision comes out of that with regards to what pathway we move forward at that point. And getting as close to elections as it'll more likely to be something that'll the next councils will be looking at.
Yeah, that's the issue. No, it's not excuses. We're just trying to work through how we get things done really quickly. And I like your idea, Councillor Halliday, of smaller townships. Like that's quite a, you know, for a smaller community. Councillor Hayward, and then do you want to make a point, Councillor Mitchell? Councillor Hayward. Oh, sorry. Councillor Goodwin?
Look, I was just wondering where the, I'm from Arcedon, where the construction and demolition, the regional facility, I presume that is going to be out of reach to the Wairarapa area. Is that correct?
To clarify, there is a update on the C&D waste streams across the different councils, and then there is a separate update on the project that's specific to Porirua, led by Porirua, but supported through Kapiti and HUT. That facility, if you go back to the project update, is still going through the consenting process. Now, it probably would be useful for a Porirua to comment on what capacity and volumes it would be able to take. But my understanding is that it wouldn't be limited to just Porirua. It just happens to be located there.
So Jeff, do you want to comment there? Jeff, sorry, do you want to make a comment about Porirua's plans around C&D? Sorry, Councillor Goodwin, and sorry, welcome to the meeting too. Sorry about that. Do you want to ask another question just while we wait for Councillor Hayward to come back online?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, I'm probably not as up to speed as I should be on this, but obviously transporting from the Wairarapa would be a major issue. I have no idea. Is there any plan around how to transport waste if we needed to Porirua?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. Councillor Mitchell?
Yeah, I just wonder if there's officers from the Wairarapa who can speak to the Wairarapa plan on page 26. I think Councillor Goodwin's joining us as a stand-in today and maybe isn't up to speed on it. Is there someone who can speak specifically to Wairarapa's own plan for C&D waste?
Hi, I'm Mandy from South Wairarapa District Council. South Wairarapa, or Wairarapa generally, currently have a facility in Masterton that we are working with to expand into more C&D recovery. So though it's not a council-owned facility, it's a private facility that moved over from Seaview, and they process all matter of construction and demolition waste, and they're looking at repurposing concrete, polystyrene. And we're also working with a company in Fielding on jib recycling. So we haven't got any intention of using Purua currently, but if private companies wish to, then we're assuming they could make that decision on their own.
Is that enough, Councillor Goodwin?
Thank you. Yeah.
Yep. Any other questions or comments?
Just to point out, I'm back online again. So
thanks, Jeff. Did you hear Councillor Goodwin's question just about C&D for the Wairarapa?
Yes, I think I put it in the chat box before I jumped off, but my understanding is that the C&D facility that's being led out by Purewa Council is not just for Purewa's waste, it's for, we are here to tātou for everybody to help everyone out. That's part of that regional approach. Kia ora.
Any other questions, colleagues? I've kept it pretty loose. Have you got a question?
Yeah, look through you, Madam Chair. Correct me if I'm wrong, in the last meeting, I was just checking on my notes, it was identified that Wellington City Council are doing something in the construction demolition waste scenario, and which is great. But I'm just wondering, does that need to be captured as part of the update, just so we know where that's at?
It is in there. Maybe when we get to the paper, it's a good question, because we want to make sure it's working as effectively as possible.
Okay.
Yeah, do you want to just, sorry, was that in the first paper?
So on page 26, there's a update of council by council, and it's included in there.
The reason I brought it up was because Wellington wasn't part of the original C&D waste conversation, was it?
No, so...
That's why I brought it up.
Yeah, no, Steph, do you want to talk to Halverson's progress?
Sure. So the information I've been provided is that they continue to accept clean fill, but for remediation purposes, and that the volumes of material coming in are lower than expected due to the economic downturns. There's less construction happening, so it's just taking a bit longer than expected. So I don't really have any other clarifications on that, but happy to take questions back to the team.
Is that enough?
Oh, look, it's more along the lines of captured, to be honest. With regards to, is this part of, here we are, we've got a plan for the region. This is something that's been additional to that, which is absolutely fine, that's what I'm just wondering whether it just needs to be incorporated in a different way so that it's part of that conversation for how we're approaching C&D from a regional perspective, rather than just being included as part of an update from Wellington City Council as such. That was my only reason for that, is whether we need to bring that into as part of that conversation. It can be a separate part of that conversation, but just grouping it together just might be, it means we can just keep an eye on things there.
Yeah, because it's part of the network. Yeah. Councillor Hayward?
Just getting confused there by Councillor Halliday's comments there. We have a completely separate item with regards to our major projects on construction and demolition waste. I'm assuming that we're talking about the same solution in that section, and it does go into some detail about how that's going to work with regards to the waste diversion through that centre, as in addition, which I'll have updates in that item about other building products and demolition products that are going to be utilised as part of a broader solution. So I think don't mind if the councillor wants to act like a bull out of the gate. I just think let's just tie hoa and wait to the next agenda item.
Okay, we can do that, but it was just a general question. Okay, any more questions on the first paper? Okay, good. All right, well, I will move it. Councillor Mitchell, do you want a second? I probably don't have much more to say except to thank the officers for their work. Look, I always want this all done yesterday, but at least we're starting to see the formation of a few resource recovery hubs. The C&D, Councillor Hayward, I am very excited about Porirura's work. It will be good.
I'm happy to go in great detail about all the cool things we're doing there too. So
yeah. So that is good. And look, obviously we're in a difficult economic cycle at the moment, but I'm confident too that the Halversons will get moving when the economy does as well. And we've got the Manor Park project, which I really, really hope will happen, but it does sound like it's going to be quite difficult. So progress is slow, and hopefully in the next triennium we can expedite things, not spend too much time planning and doing the actual plan, but actually doing. Councillor Mitchell, have you got anything you'd like to say? No? Any other comments? All right.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, go.
Manager, you call who you'd like to go. Yeah, look, I think we're making great progress compared to where, from what I can gather from the last waste minimalisation 6-year process. Not a heck of a lot, but it seems like it was all over the show. This is tight, this is organised, we've got checklists, we're moving forward, council officers are reporting back, we've got things underway. I think this is a marked improvement on the last 6 years. I think that needs to be acknowledged as well. I know certainly from my end, this is starting to make a whole heap of sense, and then it's just really just keeping that ticking along. And might ask some harsh questions with regards to things that pop up, and that sort of thing as the why to, but that's part of our role in governance, as sort of stuff. But it's certainly not taking anything away from the workflows that we've got in place, and the fact that we are making progress, and we've got a process that has accountability to it, and has milestones that can be attached, that can be reached as well. And I think that's an excellent step, and we just need to keep on top of that and just keep nudging it forward as well.
Councillor Hayward.
I think I probably should just drop it in here. You alluded to before some of the stuff that we are doing in Porirua, so perhaps it might take time just to do that quickly here. Obviously, one of the big stories is for Porirua is the introduction of a pilot for community grants for waste minimisation. It was highlighted in the submission process for our strategy discussions when we went out last year. So being able to meet that as part of our local action plan has been, for me, a great sense of accomplishment for not just Porirua but the region as well. I know that other councils are watching our pilot with interest, including I'm being told Upper Hutt and Wairarapa's officers councils officers are watching our program and taking guidance. We're helping them with giving them information from behind the scenes. There is a new drop-off centre now operating at Spicer Landfill with regards to polystyrene. It will take the small household quantities, but the larger stuff will go to our Expol, which is actually not too far from the landfill. The other thing has been the strong uptake of the battery drop-off program that was started in late last year, I think it was. And obviously, one of the benefits of that is trying to help prevent landfill fires, which can actually be not just expensive, but can actually be defeating to the securing of the waste that does end up in landfill. So there was a fire, I think a couple of weeks ago, a small fire in the landfill because of a battery. So people using that service is helping us to reduce that risk as well. And finally, I note that it is mentioned in the report around the government's wanting to look at the waste minimisation levy as a useful means to help with regards to emergency management. Irrespective of whether the government goes down that direction or not, Porirua City Council has committed to lead the regional work stream on waste minimisation after major events. I've been told that there's a few new personnel who have had personal experience from their work in the aftermath of Cyclone Gabriel. So the focus will be on moving beyond just the desktop table exercise that Remo did a couple of years back on the need to think of spatial planning and the types of facilities that were required to deal with the likely large amounts of waste that comes in after, whether it's a tsunami, earthquake, cyclone, what have you. And now it's to talk about the actual logistics of how to make sure that that's working. So we've got that in the book ready to go if or when that happens. So I would say that in following on from Councillor Halliday's point in concluding, there is a great deal that's been reported locally. Some of the big stuff we'll talk about in the next agenda items, but it is something to be proud of the work that's been done there, and my full esteem to all of the officers across the entire region. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor Hayward, that is helpful. Any other last comments? No, okay. No right of reply needed. If we can all just vote now, you have to say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Is anyone against? I think so. That's unanimous. We can record that as unanimous. Excellent. Thank you very much. All right, now we love talking about C&D. So, officers, do you have any comments to make just on the paper, although obviously we've all read it?
Thank you. So this paper is in direct response to a request from the previous committee regarding the generation of or production of a C&D roadmap, which officers have now developed. And so handing it back to you for any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Hayward.
Okay, it's working great. First of all, thank you to the officers for preparing this report. Secondly, I also appreciate that there's been the adjustments, which was mentioned actually in the previous item, about changing the reporting approach so as we can have these bigger projects talked about in 6 monthly periods. So please, thank you for reflecting the feedback from our previous meeting into reporting. I wanted to just, not having anyone from Porirua City Council to speak from their side, I thought it might be useful for me to, take the information that I was able to get from the briefing that I had with officers late last week in preparation for this meeting, if that would be okay.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Whai Upoko. I still remain confident that the target launch date that's been mentioned in the paper on notice is accurate. I would like to see us being able to have a centre open by Christmas. There are risks which are largely outside of Porirua City Council's control, predominantly, as has been mentioned before, the resource consent, though I would think that this would be, I would have thought, a consent that would be relatively easier now that there has been a new site located close to Spicer landfill, which will make it more convenient for potential users, operators, demolition and construction firms to be able to divert waste in a convenient way, as well as it being in effectively an industrial area. Some of those more acute hazards that may have happened in the previous site selected are not so much an issue. Plus, this is diversion. I would think from a resource management perspective, this is a good thing to want to consider as part of a impartial process. And I'll leave it at that far for that part. What was the other thing too? The lease has been signed by the operator for the equipment that had been purchased by Porirua City Council for this facility. And so a number of those contracts are now starting to fall along the way into place as well. So that gives me confidence, as I said initially, about the target project. The officers wanted to remind me that there are some products which won't be accepted at this site. The reusable items, your doors, your windows, they will be handled by a separate provider that's already just down the road. So there's no point in trying to duplicate something that's already been provided. Polystyrene, again, I've mentioned before, for smaller amounts of polystyrene, there is the collection centre at Spicer that's just reopened, or opened rather, and then larger stuff will go to X next poll. And then with regards to PVC products and textiles, they will not be accepted at this facility. So that's all I've got in terms of my update, if that helps the situation. Whaiupoko. Kia ora.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Other questions? Councillor Mitchell?
Yeah, a lot of our councils, I know our council does a really good job of making information available to residents on where they can take different recyclable items they can't use in curbside. There's a really good overview here of what kinds of C&D materials can already be diverted in different ways. I just wonder if we're proactively engaging with the building industry to let them know these things. Is this information available readily to them?
I can't really comment at a regional level other than referring to that there is a separate project, a major project on the business engagement that's still in the planning stages. So that probably would be the key one to engage with a lot of the businesses. If you're just referring to the, I guess the developers or the building industry, there is some work happening, especially in the context of implementing the bylaw requirement around C&D plans. And as part of that, we are also, making them aware of those things.
Thank you. The other question I had is quite a specific one, and it's mentioned under the timber section of on page 32 about this place that we could send timber to be used. I think it's for some kind of industrial process heat, but way up in Northland, and this has been mentioned at our meetings before. I just kind of wondered, given the fact that treated timber presumably is going to be an infinite waste stream in our country, if there's any industry or businesses that similarly use process heat in our region who could be encouraged to change to a timber heat source. For example, even within our own networks, our wastewater treatment plants have dryers that I believe Seaview's powered by gas currently. So has there been any conversations locally about any particular industries that could perhaps be changed to treated timber as an energy source?
Yes, we do. We have done some of that work. Unfortunately, there's very limited options. We did also consider that as a feedstock for the replacement dryer in Seaview. And Wellington Water went through its own business case process and optioneering. And so that was discounted for a number of reasons, and they ended up selecting the electric boiler as their preferred option going forward. So that, co-combustion was one of the options that was considered. And they carried out a multi-criteria analysis. So they, without going into the detail, they ultimately settled for another option as the preferred one. With regard to, are there other options? Well, potentially yes, or at least we're not aware of them, other than Golden Bay Cement does take it. And we've also looked at, in my team, around what the costs would be to ship material up there. So it's still prohibitively expensive. It's certainly possible, but the reality is landfilling then becomes a much cheaper option. So that's kind of where sort of speaks to some of the constraints and barriers around it. So separating it out is one part of it. Finding a market for the material is really the more critical aspect for a lot of these C&D materials. I guess coming back to the Porirua facility, I would envisage that treated timber will be one of the waste streams. And once the facility is there, I think that'll probably be the point where we can assess more objectively whether or not it is economic to send it somewhere else or find an alternative market for it.
Thanks. Councillor Hayward.
Thank you for that previous response. Following on from that, would it not be axiomatic to think that there will be some types of timber which obviously will have higher value, for instance, native timbers, which will be far more appealing to potential customers of reuse? And a separate question, knowing that there are a range of historical timber products that have utilised chemicals, including dioxins and DDT, for the treatment as part of its manufacture, is there a risk to human health if we are diverting it towards I guess, for lack of a better phrase, a combustible option? If we, should we be advocating that?
I can quickly speak to the latter one around, collecting or separating out treated wood and then combusting it in a facility somewhere. So emission control equipment is obviously very critical to that. So it's not something treated wood is something that you should not burn at home or just put into any sort of wood burner. So that's why the only market at the moment is Golden Bay Cement, because they do have a consent. They're able to combust that material. So it's not something that is easily set up because of all those requirements around air quality control.
Is that all, Councillor Hayward?
I'm happy it's been addressed, so I'll leave it there. Kia ora.
Okay, thanks. Actually, could I just pick up that question about the Indigenous timbers? Is there much demand? I certainly got some recycled timber when I needed to replace a floorboard. It was wonderful.
Well, there is some. It is a niche sector, and I know that my team is actually working to potentially set up a drop-off at Silverstream, and then a company would get the material that they want, so recycle that native wood timber. But it is very much a niche application, whereas when it comes to treated wood more generally, we're talking about large-scale diversion. So we do have second-hand building product suppliers, and in fact I think Councillor Hayward just referred to one in Porirua, so you can get that sort of older windows and frames. You can get those there. As to recycling some of the treated timber or the native timbers, that's a little bit more specific. So it's not a large scale industry, I don't think.
Okay, oh, that's interesting. Given the number of homes, the way and that we tend to go for wood. The levy at $60 a tonne. I think I was told last Trinium it needed to really be at maybe minimum was $90, but really over $100 to effect change. Would that still be the view of officers?
I can't comment on the exact level. I am aware that MFE's done some work on where the levy where it might need to go to before you see certain diversion opportunities becoming more economic. It probably will depend on the different waste streams, but I can't comment on the level of where it should be today.
But they have done some work. Is that easy to find?
I can't comment on that. We'd have to look into that.
Okay, so you can't remember seeing a document, or you just sort of were aware of it?
There was some work done a few years ago by MFE on that.
Okay.
We would have to look up the report.
Might easily be Googleable. Yeah. Councillor Hayward?
Just on that last point, would unfortunately PCC officers aren't here, but but maybe one of the other officers might be able to recall when the development of a CND diversion solution was being proposed. There was a business case prepared by an external operator to talk about the broader economic case for diversion. I can't recall if there were any high-level conversations about the levy and the relative value, but it might be some of the solutions or some of the answers that you're seeking, Whaiupoko, in that document.
Thank you.
I can briefly comment on that. That was that work was done by Morrison Lowe, commissioned by Porirua about 3 years ago, and that went through a staged approach. If I remember correctly, I don't think it looked at where the levy would have to be. It looked at what markets are available at the expected level of the levy, which at that case would have been, I think it would have been announced that it was going to reach at least $60 a tonne. So they would have worked on what markets are available for different materials at that, looking at those constraints. So that those reports were done.
I definitely saw it somewhere. Okay. And you know that I know there are a variety of factors, and I've raised this with you before, Ian. The 30% target, with what's happening in Wellington and Porirua, do we have any understanding of how much we will be able to divert to reach that 30% target? And do you think that people in the sector are excited about the possibility of diversion and recycling?
I don't think we can say with confidence that we will get there. There's so many factors that this depends on, including once assuming the Porirua facility opens at the end of the year, we don't fully understand yet how much is actually going to be diverted, because that will depend on what the markets are for those materials. And then you've got factors like the Manor Park facility, which is currently still going through the consenting process, whether or not it will open. Those are all unanswered questions. So I don't think we can say with any confidence that we will or won't achieve that target by 2030. It's effectively outside of our control for mostly. And in terms of the sector, I can't speak to the sector in terms of what they think, but I would say by and large, they wouldn't necessarily be very aware of, what's coming down the stream.
That's interesting. You think that they would be, because there was some meetup of, sorry, I can't remember which report it was. There was a meeting of a waste group for C&D. That's right, the Wellington Region Build Cluster. Did that go okay?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So the industry members of the Wellington Region Build Cluster are very motivated towards diverting as much material as possible. However, I don't know if you could say that's a true representation of the industry.
Who's in it?
There are, you might need to help me with this, David. Naylor Love.
Yeah, LT McGuinness.
Oh.
Brand's one of the kind of industry research bodies as well, is quite closely involved. So there's really good alignment there. But yeah, echoing what Steph has just said.
Except with Naylor Love and LT, that is, at least for Wellington City, that's a good thing, because there's such big builders here. So
yeah,
some other people will join.
And some more developers as well, who do the individual developments who are interested.
So are you reaching out to them to try and get them to join in?
So the approach for the regional build clusters is pretty organic. So the membership is open to anyone who wants to join in. And so feelers are put out all the time. So it's about whether people see that there's value in it or not. So it's not a council-run initiative. It's being done as a group.
Right. Okay. And sorry, just the last question I had, and it sort of does apply to the last paper. The data that we've got on C&D waste, the work that we've done to get this framework done, is that helping us to understand more clearly, so when we do the next waste assessment, how much C&D we're producing? And obviously it depends on the economic cycles too.
It will give us information on the high level volumes, but I would say that's not terribly different to where we've been in the past. We can estimate that stuff. The question is often, when it comes to diversion, it's very much waste stream specific. And just looking at a building site just down the road, you have a large skip in and there's all sorts of waste in it. There's no way for us to, at the moment, actually estimate what's happening in the marketplace, how much material is coming out of these different waste sites. We can only see what's coming to landfills. So the data, getting a better handle on the data is proving to be a very difficult task. We just don't have the means to obtain that information.
And MFE's not really interested in getting a proper national data framework? Did that sort of go by the wayside with the change in government? Can't remember seeing the document.
So I think you're referring to the national licensing system where operators and collectors would have to be licensed. So there's been no further talk from central government around that.
Yeah. Okay, so it might require another change of government. Sorry, I do have one more question. Appreciate the next triennium, there will be, whoever's on the committee and there'll be different council priorities. But is there a way that the process for doing the waste assessment and doing the plan can be really shortened so that councils around the region can get on with actually doing the work? Because the priorities shouldn't be changing in terms of C&D and organics, really. Like, we know that's where we've got some big issues.
Apologies, but what exactly is the question?
So the question is, can you see that process can be shortened? Because it's a really long process. I've spent quite a lot of time now, and so have officers and other councillors who've been on this committee. Going through the waste assessment process is slow and long, and getting the plan together. Have you thought about shortening that as much as possible so that the councils can focus on actual delivery? Because obviously we've only got 3 years every triennium. It's really short.
What I can say is that we have gone through a lessons learned exercise following the last development of the waste assessment, which is then an input into the WMMP. And that can be reflected in the next time we will go through this exercise. However, we're not scheduled to start that again until 2027 or so, 2028. So the next, this current plan is going till 2029. So it's fair to say that at an officer level, we haven't thought about the exact scope and the timing of that project to develop the next WMMP. The focus is entirely on delivering on the current plan.
Okay, that's good. Sorry, I just thought I'd seen at some point some discussion about the next one. Okay, but just if that could be a suggestion put forward, that hopefully, depending on the priorities of the region, that the waste plan as it is good, just might need a bit of editing, bit of updating, not a whole complete rewrite. Cool. Any last questions, comments? Councillor Halliday.
Yeah, look, I've got a few things, actually. I don't think a change of government's going to make a difference because Labor ditched the container return scheme, which just beggars belief at the time, I must say. So I don't hold a lot of confidence there, I'm afraid, although I expect one would expect the kaupapa to come through in that way. Look, we talk a lot about, and sorry, this is just a general comment, we talk a lot about diversion and looking at ways that we can divert things. We had a situation, and I was trying to bring attention to a thing called the Living Building Challenge, and that talks to, it's an international process, if you like. Victoria University utilised it in their build up here, which I think we went and had a look at. But the Wānanga kicked it off up in Otaki, and that is a mindset with regards to going into a project and during a project. And I appreciate there are cost constraints in relation to it as well from the processing perspective. But one thing that they very much became aware of, it's not just about the diversion. You can break everything down, which is exactly what they did. They sorted everything out. Then they had to find the pathways, but we've also got the niche businesses that are actually doing something with this stuff. In other words, making board, making this, making that. And the comments that came back was, look, well, yes, we can take it, but can you guys please purchase our end product? Because that's the other aspect of this. We need to be supporting the closed, the circular part to this as well. So from a procurement process, if we can be looking at, and I also appreciate what we're talking about here, a substantial mind change. We're talking about a substantial change in the way we do business, and it's going to take time. So the fact that we're pushing this along, I think, is absolutely fantastic. But it ain't. Some things will happen quick, but generally, what we want is good, solid changes that's enduring and lasting, as such. But a lot of that's going to come down to mindsets. In other words, developers will need to make the decision that they're going to do this. And that's either going to happen through legislation or bylaws or something along that sort of. But at the end of the day, you can push someone into doing something. But if we don't actually have the pathways sorted out as well, we're just creating another problem as well. So it's all got to come along. It's all got to come along together. So I know certainly encouraging our council, and it takes a while for this stuff to stick. You keep bringing it up. But I know in the Waikanae Library upgrade that we're doing at the moment, that's been part of it in consideration. Not 100% consideration, but I'll take it because it's progress as such. And if we can get some of these, I remember I can't remember what the firm was that did the architectural firm with the wānanga. They were this was the first time they'd done any of that. They were very, very sceptical, and then going along to a hui afterwards, had nothing but praise about the process because, they boldly went into it. Now, freely admit, the wānanga had to make a financial decision because there's a front-end cost to that. But they have been very surprised at how quickly they've regained that investment with regards to savings that they've made around sewage, around power, around all the other aspects that come into this. So if I can just encourage councillors to just nudge your councils along that sort of discussion process, not expecting it 100% take up immediately as such, but just keeping that conversation going pushes us in that right direction. Because to me, it's that mindset and that which needs to be followed up by legislative change potentially as well. My other question was, in regards to some of these bigger projects that we're doing, I'm picking we're going to be doing business cases around them, which will then be costed. But are we looking at joint understandings or with central government that could potentially leverage the funding that councils are going to put into this with regards to the provision in this space? Is there any sort of thought around that? In other words, if what we're talking with a C&D solution, say that potentially Wellington Council is doing, is large. It's a big project that's potentially going to be regional in its collection, shall we say? Well, why shouldn't central government tip some money into that? Is there advocacy that needs to be done, or is there a relationship that needs to be formed with central government in regards to, which I'm sure there is, but in regards to, look, we're looking at doing this work. Can we get an indicator that if we do this work and it's going to cost X amount, that there might be some funding that come out of the government's portion of the waste levy to help supplement this? Of course, you're not going to get it on all the different projects, but you might be able to get some of those sort of joint understandings on some of the larger projects. Has there been any sort of thought around that at all, or is that still a little bit further on down the track?
So we're certainly looking at that for a number of the projects. I'm just looking at the soil and aggregate recovery facility at Silverstream. Potential government funding is certainly at the forefront of our discussions. However, it's very difficult to get indications from MFE as to whether or whether they will not support it. Ultimately, it'll come down to you have to do an application and then it will be assessed, and then you may or may not get funding. And certainly that's the case in the Fogo project between Wellington and the Hut. We've been in discussions with MFE for quite some time. Yeah. And we have secured some funding towards the bin rollout, but whether or not we will get funding support towards the processing solution is still very much up in the air. So we're certainly looking at external funding sources where we can, but it tends to be very project specific.
So, yeah, and look, I'd be very surprised if you weren't, to be honest. It's not something I'm expecting, this is some sort of light bulb moment as such. But what is the approach? Do you normally have to put a business case together before you can really approach government? Rather, because I appreciate back here they're going to be going, yeah, whatever, we'll see whatever comes out on the tail end, and then we have to put some cases to them as such.
Very much so. I mean, usually business cases are one of the key, well, they should really be part of your project for any major investment as a default. I mean, looking at Porirua, they did receive some funding from MFE, and that followed a business case process. Yeah. So that's normally the process.
No, that's lovely. Thank you.
Councillor Halliday, can I just make a comment? Because I think you raised a really good point in your first part. So I think it was 2016, I got agreement from my colleagues to make Tākina a Green Star building. It was only 5. I wanted it to be 6. And then again, when we did Te Matapihi, again did that. The idea, though, is for that to be in policy, so it's not up to an individual councillor, and Green Star buildings are okay, but actually the living building is even better, right? So one thing that we can all do as councils is when we are procuring large civic amenities is to say, well, actually, we are going to do it to a higher environmental standards. So there is actually something within our power as, as large property owners, and we, build these massive bits of infrastructure. Also, of course, there's things like roads too, where we could, use lots of glass. There are some materials which help, So I think maybe that's just, it's probably not something we can agree to, but it would be good to actively, like we actually got our procurement policy sent through committee, so I don't know if the rest of you have done that, but that's an excellent place to put it, or in low carbon plans as well, to talk about the built environment. And I'm going to, just as an example too, like it will be difficult, but say, okay, we've got to spend $800,000 on a electrical system for the Begonia house, because at the moment it's run by gas. So that's not good. So we need to, but that's quite a chunk of money. It's not an easy kind of spend, but like that. Project by project, when we're doing all these big things, we've actually got a heap, and we can lead in the marketplace as well. The other thing too, which I'm deeply frustrated by, it's one of my failures, the Massey University is really the only building I think in the city, or maybe there's a few apartment buildings with a green roof. We've never been able to do one in the city. So there's another place where we could do some good work to help the environment. Deputy Mayor Swales.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I just have a question for Ewan, and it's just a little bit of comfort. Having looked at the Regional Waste Minimisation Plan 2023 to 2029, and I went through that after the question from the Chair, I'm quite confident that the timelines that we've got around a lot of those projects, that I can't actually see why they would be tweaked, and that would be officer-driven if they were, would it not?
Is there any particular projects you're referring to? Or?
Well, when I was looking at all of the diversion, the organics, they're all in the pipeline, particularly, when we look at recycle, compost, anaerobic digestion, all of those. We've got, the work is ongoing, the waste levy, it gives us where the money comes from. I couldn't see why this plan that we've adopted until 2029 would be detracted from, or a pathway going away, because I think I'm not saying it's a better plan than the one it was, but the KPIs around this plan give us some assurance as elected people that why would you tinker with it? Would I be correct?
Yes. So I mean, we are working on implementing the current plan, and so the timeframes are as reported in the dashboard and in the major projects updates. And then obviously every 6 months we've got the updates on the local action plans. The implementation of those is obviously dependent on councils driving those individually. So I don't see any major reason for changing that now. Obviously, I do take the point that we want to go as fast as we can, and preferably faster than we currently are, but we also need to acknowledge the constraints that we're facing, and that some of those things are outside our control, be it the consenting for Manor Park, or be it the consenting for the Porirua C&D facility, for example.
Just a further question, going to Councillor Halliday's question that he put there. When we put in our submission to MFE around that closed on the 1st of July, our recommendation was that they should actually look at partnering some of the smaller initiatives from smaller councils, not just look at the big projects that are there, because, some really amazing initiatives come from those smaller places, and sometimes you need to put your toe in the water to just test it before you upscale it to see whether the outcomes are what you want. So we did put that in. The other thing that I'd like to make a comment on is we are going to review our procurement policy, so I will certainly take that up. So thank you to Chair.
That would be excellent, and actually you raise a good point too, because there's some good regional development there, rather than mines or things. That's excellent, because you can do them for quite low cost too, which is rather than the millions which we potentially need. That's good. All right, any other last comments? Keep it rather free and easy here, Okay, good. All right, Councillor Mitchell, would you like to move the paper?
Yeah, happy to move.
Would anyone else like to second?
Seconded.
Porirua. Right, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Would anyone like to make any comments? No? All right, if we can vote, those in favour say aye. Any against?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, lovely. Passed unanimously again. Great. Okay. Last paper. Take it as read. Obviously, thank you, Letitia. It was your big moment, but yeah. Has anyone got any questions of that one? No. All right, we're just going to keep monitoring and updating, and obviously we'll have more to tell you about organics in September. Would someone like to move that paper? Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Deputy Mayor. Right, okay, yeah, you can have that one. Any debate? All right, Kua mana, that's all we need to vote. Sorry, I think we're all in favour. Yep. Okay, right, Kua mana, all passed unanimously again. That is wonderful. Right, so atene kua mutu te hui. If you would like to join me in the karakia, we got that up? Yep. Unahia, unahia, unahia ki te uru tapanui, kia wātea, kia mama, te nako, te tinana, te wairua. I te ara takatū, koe rā e rongo, whakaerea aki ku ronga. Kia wātea, ai rā kua wātea.